Today we're going to learn how to add sprites to our game or background scene in GameLab and change them a little bit. So first of all, what is a sprite? A sprite is a name we give to a collection of values in GameLab that represent a character in a story, animation, or a game. So think of some sort of object that you want to manipulate in a game. Maybe it's coins that are falling down. That would be a sprite. The main character or player in a game that you have, that's also a sprite. So a sprite is stored in a variable with a label. When we look at that in GameLab, here's what it looks like. In the animation or the coding tab, you'll see a sprite on your screen here where it is showing up in your game. There is an entire drawer of the toolbox that is all stuff that controls and defines what your sprite looks like. When you pull out Sprite code blocks, this is kind of what they look like here. When we create a sprite, after we've made one, we have to actually pull out a variable from the sprite drawer to create that variable of the sprite in GameLab. The first values we give it are a location on the screen, an X and a Y location. And the second value that you always give a sprite is its animation. Think of that as like a costume from, if you remember back when you worked in Scratch in previous years, it's just the outfit that that sprite wears. So even if it's called Bunny, it could be anything else. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you choose for the image. So in the animation tab, there's so many things that we can do. If we look at, I'm going to pop into a project here. If we look at the animation tab, we add an animation by clicking on the plus button, and this brings up a library of images that already exist for you. There are so many pages and pages and pages of them, which is awesome, and these are all copyright safe for you to be using in your games. You don't need to worry about that. You can also draw your own. Sometimes I need to draw my own image. I'm not an excellent artist by any means, but sometimes I do need to do that. And you can upload images that you download from the web. You should make sure if you're doing that, that the image is labeled for reuse for you to use in education. So when we create a sprite, the first thing we do is find a picture for it. Here's the image, and it has a name right here. You can change that to meet whatever it needs you need, but it should make sense. I got rid of the 1 because I'm not going to add any more brown cats to my game. I could get rid of this underscore if I wanted to, but I wouldn't name it coin because that doesn't make sense. It should have a name that makes sense. When I am creating those sprites, that's when I would come over to the drawer now and create the variables for it. So that's just a basic overview of what a sprite is and where we find all of the code blocks and where we upload our images for the sprites. So we are going to work with our underwater scene to learn how to use sprites. If you go into your projects and open your underwater scene, we're going to get started there. If you didn't finish yours or for some reason it is missing, here's what I want you to do. In Google Classroom, I have linked a document that has this code in it. This is the code for my basic background. I want you to copy, so Control-C, and in a new blank document, go to Show Text right here, and get rid of all the code that's in here, and Control-V. So if you run that right now, you should get my basic background. You only need to do that if you didn't get yours finished or for some reason it disappeared. I just want to make sure you have that background so that you can be successful with this lesson. So I'm just going to name this my underwater, and I'm going to use this one for this lesson. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is remix that project. I want you to leave that basic background in there so that if you wanted to use it in another game later, you still have it. To do that, you click on the Remix button up here at the top. I'm going to rename that. It says Remix, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to rename this to Fish Tank. That's kind of the, like I said, I'm using this term loosely, game that we're going to make. There's no player control in this game. And I'm going to go into the Animation tab. I'm going to get rid of this cat that I put in here. And we're going to add fish. If you don't want to use fish, you can use other underwater animals. However, if you do that, you might start getting confused with the naming, but that's up to you. I'll do a fish and one other creature to help you maybe have an easier time with this. I'm going to grab a blue fish and get rid of the one on here. Don't like those numbers. I'm going to rename fish blue. And in the Code tab, I'm going to go above my draw loop here and go to Sprites and grab this variable and pull it up. I'm going to name this one Blue Fish. I'm going to leave it at 200, 200 right now. We can adjust where he is in a little bit. And then I'm going to grab the second block, which is this sprite set animation. I'm going to use the same name because I want to set that specific sprite to the image. So blue fish. And when I click on this drop down, you'll see that I have an option here. Now if I run this, oh, I haven't put in my draw sprites yet. You notice nothing popped up. This is a sprite, so I need to go all the way to the bottom of my code here, and in the world, I'm going to grab this yellow draw sprites right here, and now when I run it, there's my huge blue fish in the middle of my screen. So again, up here we have a variable, and then we set that animation. That's all the first two blocks from the sprite drawer. Make sure to add the draw sprites to the bottom of the draw loop. So sprites have a lot of different properties. We can change things about them. We can duplicate them and change their sizes. We can change their location or their rotation on the screen. To do that, if I go into the Animation tab, this button right here is for duplicating. So you can duplicate the fish that we have, or you can go choose a new fish to use. So there's blue fish, green fish, and pink fish, silver fish, and then there's, oh, where are the brown ones? Oh, the brown fish with like the eyes that make them look like they're not alive. They look like dead fish. They have X's for eyes. I don't understand those. I'm not going to use them, but I'll use the green fish. So, fish green. I'm going to go to Code, and now I need to add the variable for this next fish. So I'm going to pull a variable down, and I'm going to call it green fish. And I'm going to move him over a little bit. So if I take my mouse, you can see it's telling me where my X and Y are. I'm going to start one right here, so about 380. 300X, 80Y. Then I'm going to pull out this set animation. I want my green fish to have the fish green costume on it or animation. Now when I run it, you can see here's my green fish and there's my blue fish. Aren't they cute? Now that blue fish is huge. One of the things we can change about these is their size. So if you go down about 7 code blocks, Sprite.scale is how you change the size. Scale is a value of 1 for the size it is right now. So if you want to make it smaller, it needs to be 0 point something. So half would be 0.5. If you want to make something bigger, like say by half, it would be 1.5. I want blue fish to be maybe half the size he is, so I'm going to say 0.5. Now they look a little bit more reasonable in their sizing. We can also add text to our screen, and our scene is going to be just called Fish Tank. You could give it some other cute name like Fish Race or whatever you want, but let me show you where we're going to put that information. If you go to the Drawing tab, there is a text field and then a bunch of code blocks for adjusting the properties of your text. So I'm going to first grab a comment, and before my sprite here, I'm going to say title, because that's the title that's going up in the top. I want the title to be right about here where my mouse is, and I can see underneath my screen, under the reset button, that I'm at about 130 and then 30 pixels down. So, text. I want the color for this. I'm going to do fill color. I'm going to do black, I think. I might change my mind and pick a bright color. I'm going to then grab this text string block. This allows me to tell it the exact text I want to show up on the screen. The quotes around it say this is a string. It lets code.org know that that's what you're looking at. So I'm going to name mine Fish Tank, and I'm going to put it, like I said, at about 130 X and 30Y. Now when I reset and run, ooh, it still has the stroke from the seaweed, so I have to say no stroke. And I'll reset and run, and that's tiny. So I'm going to adjust my font size. Text size right here is the size. 12 is the default. I want it bigger. I'm going to try 24 and see if that's big enough. That's better. I need to move it over a little bit. It's not quite center. So since I want to move it to the right, I'm going to change this X right here, the 130, to 150. And reset and run. And that's much better. So, here's what I want you to do after you've done this very basic sprite background that we did. I want you to open the background that you created on Thursday and today. And I want you to try adding 3 or more sprites and resizing them and moving them to the locations that you want them. Remember, you need this sprite variable block to create the sprite. You need to give it a meaningful name, otherwise it doesn't make sense when you're using the other code blocks and when you want to tell it to do stuff or have interactions with other sprites. Make sure you select the correct animation from this animation drop down, otherwise your picture's not going to be the right one. And then use the Sprite.scale block to resize your image as needed. Again, 1 is the size it is right now. If you need it smaller, it needs to be 0 point a number. And if you need it to be larger, it'll be 1.5 or a number bigger than that. And don't forget to add some text to your image.